"You're trespassing on private property," Karen screeched, pointing at me with a shaking finger. Her voice rang out across the cul-de-sac like a police siren. "I'm calling the cops." I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. Instead, I pulled out a folded piece of paper from the inside pocket of my jacket, slow and calm. My fingers didn't shake. Hers did. "What is that? Some fake notice?" she snapped, her arms crossed like she owned the world. Her HOA badge was clipped tight to her polo shirt, the kind she always wore to feel important. I looked her straight in the eyes, unfolded the document, and handed it to her. "It's the deed," I said, "to your house." She stared at it. And then she laughed, loud, high-pitched, and hollow, until her eyes dropped to the line with her home address, and her face froze. That was the moment her whole reality started to crack. But we're not there yet. Let me take you back to how all of this started, because the truth is, I didn't plan to own her home. I just wanted to live in peace. It all began 4 months earlier, when I moved into a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood in a small town in North Carolina. I'd recently retired from my 20-year job with the Navy and used my savings to buy a modest house. Nothing fancy, just something peaceful, close to my sister, and good for gardening. I'd been through enough storms in life. I just wanted calm. The street seemed nice at first. Folks waved when you drove by. Kids rode bikes in the late afternoon sun. Lawns were neat, mailboxes freshly painted, and the birds actually sang like it was some kind of commercial. It felt like I could finally exhale. That is, until I met her. Karen. She introduced herself the second day I moved in, but it wasn't a welcome. It was a warning. "I'm the president of the HOA," she said, arms folded like a prison warden. "We take rules seriously here." I smiled politely and nodded, thinking it was one of those routine introductions. But over the next few days, I realized it wasn't just talk. She left notes on my porch about my trash bin being out 15 minutes too early. She knocked on my door to complain about the color of my mailbox, not HOA-approved beige, apparently. Once, she even scolded me for having the wrong kind of mulch in my front yard. I kept calm, always, because I wasn't about to fight with someone whose life revolved around being a self-appointed neighborhood sheriff. But it wasn't just me. I started talking to other neighbors, Miss Gina across the street, who got fined for hanging her wind chimes too loud. Mr. Lewis, 2 doors down, who'd been reported for leaving his garden hose on the lawn. It seemed like everyone was walking on eggshells. Still, I didn't want trouble. I'd seen enough of that in the world. Instead, I tried to show kindness. I mowed the lawn for Miss Gina when her hip was acting up. I fixed Mr. Lewis's gutter during a storm. I even waved to Karen every morning, even though she pretended not to see me. But the kindness didn't stop her. Then one Saturday morning, I woke up to the sound of banging, metal on metal. I walked outside in my slippers, confused. And there it was. A group of workers dismantling the small garden swing I'd built in my backyard. A simple wooden bench tied between 2 sturdy posts, nothing fancy. I'd built it with my own hands, stained it, sanded it. It was my sanctuary. I walked up, trying to stay calm. "What's going on?" One of the workers shrugged. "HOA ordered us to remove non-compliant structures." I looked around. No letter, no warning, nothing. Just Karen, standing at the edge of her driveway, watching with her arms crossed like a queen surveying her kingdom. That day broke something in me. Not in an angry way, not in a petty way, but in a way that reminded me of something I learned long ago. Power without empathy is dangerous. And I'd seen people like her before, just in different uniforms. So I went inside and pulled up my laptop. I started reading, learning, looking through the HOA bylaws, property records, ownership structures, the things most folks never bother to check. And that's when I saw it. A pattern. Karen didn't actually own her house outright. It was part of a land lease agreement, a rare kind in our town. She owned the building, yes, But the land? That was still under a separate title, owned by a private trust. I kept digging, and I found out that the trust had just listed the land for sale. It was a long shot, a crazy idea even. But I called the number listed, and that phone call, it changed everything. That's when I found out the land wasn't just for sale. It had been for months. No buyers, no interest, just sitting there, waiting. The price? More than I'd usually spend. But I had the funds. Barely. I asked for a meeting, drove 3 towns over, sat across from a lawyer in a suit with coffee stains on his tie and a messy stack of files on his desk. And I bought it. The land. The land under Karen's house. Under the HOA clubhouse. And under the little strip of grass she prided herself on micromanaging. I didn't do it to ruin her life. I swear I didn't. I did it to stop her from ruining everyone else's. At first, I didn't say anything. I just waited. She kept sending her nasty notices. She fined me for letting a kid draw chalk on my driveway. She fined Miss Gina again for planting too many marigolds. Then one day, she tried to get my water shut off for non-compliance over a supposedly unauthorized fence repair. That was the day I decided it was time. I walked to her door, knocked. She opened it, still wearing that smug little smile. "What do you want now?" she asked. And that's when I handed her the paper, the deed, the proof, the words printed bold and clear, owner of record, her address, her lot number, all there. She held it, read it, laughed, until she didn't, until she looked up at me, and for the first time since I moved in, she said nothing. But just as her lips parted, her phone buzzed. A message popped up. She gasped, looked at me again, pale as a ghost, and I said, "You might want to check with the water company. You're on my land now." But right then, before she could speak, Mr. Lewis came running down the street, shouting something that made my stomach drop. "There's a problem at the HOA office. You better come see this, now." Karen spun on her heels and ran, and I followed her, because I already had a bad feeling something much bigger had just started. The HOA clubhouse sat at the end of the street, an old brick building that tried too hard to look important, with its fake columns and peeling white paint. Karen ran up the steps like the ground was on fire beneath her feet. I wasn't far behind, my boots hitting the pavement with calm, steady thuds. A small group of neighbors had started to gather, pulled in by the noise, the tension, or maybe just curiosity. Inside, the place was chaos. One of the assistant board members, a skinny man named Bill with glasses always halfway down his nose, stood near the copier with his hands in the air. "I didn't send it," he kept saying. "I don't know who did. It just printed." Karen stormed past him and yanked the paper from the tray. Her eyes darted across the sheet, lips moving as she read, and then crinkle. She crushed the page in her fist. I stepped forward. "What's going on?" She didn't answer me, but Miss Gina, who'd slipped in quietly behind us, whispered, "Somebody sent a notice to the entire neighborhood, from the new landowner." The letter was short, straight to the point. It explained that the land beneath several homes, the HOA clubhouse, and the shared green spaces had changed hands. The new owner wanted to meet with residents soon to discuss next steps. No threats, no drama, just facts. But that was all it took. The room buzzed like a kicked beehive. Some folks looked confused, some looked scared. Karen looked like she might explode. "Who is this?" she demanded. "Who sent this? Who's behind this stunt?" Bill held up his hands again. "It came through the system. No one knows." I leaned against the wall near the doorway, letting her unravel. I wasn't ready to reveal it was me. Not yet. Not until the time was right. So I slipped out, leaving them in their confusion. The next few days, the neighborhood felt different. Quiet, but not peaceful. Karen was uncharacteristically absent. No patrols, no notes, no lectures. It was as if she was hiding in her house, trying to figure out what had just happened. Whispers swirled through the street like smoke, people asking each other who the mystery landowner was, what it meant for their property, and what kind of change was coming. Mr. Lewis walked over one morning while I was watering my front lawn. "You know anything about this?" he asked, eyes narrowed but kind. I smiled. "Just heard the same as everyone else." He nodded slowly. "Well, whoever it is, I hope they're not like her." That hit me. Because I didn't just want to be not like her. I wanted to fix what she broke. I wanted to show people that power didn't always mean punishment. So the following Sunday, I printed out my own letter. This one was personal. I walked house to house, handing them out myself. It said there'd be a community meeting at the old recreation center, off HOA grounds. No fines, no rules, no pressure. Just a chance for everyone to speak freely, to talk about how things could be different, better. And that Sunday afternoon, nearly the whole block showed up. People sat in folding chairs, some brought kids, others brought casseroles and tea. The air felt lighter, softer. I stood at the front and told them everything. Who I was, what I'd done, why I bought the land. Some jaws dropped, some folks chuckled, a few clapped. I wasn't sure what to expect, but what I got was a wave of relief. Because for the first time in years, people weren't scared of getting a warning letter for having a flower bed too bright or a flag too bold. They felt heard, but not everyone clapped. The next morning, I stepped onto my porch and found something waiting. A dead rose, laid gently on the welcome mat. No note, no explanation. I picked it up, staring at the brown curled petals. Someone was not happy. Later that day, I heard yelling outside. 2 teenagers had been roller skating down the sidewalk. Karen, finally back on her rounds, was screaming at them, threatening to report their parents for allowing reckless activity. I walked over. "Hey," I said calmly, placing myself between her and the boys. "Let it go." She stared at me. Her face was pale, but her eyes were on fire. "You think buying some land gives you the right to undo everything this neighborhood stands for?" she hissed. "No," I said, "but it gives me the right to protect people from being bullied on it." Her lips curled. "This isn't over," she said, voice low. "I never said it was," I replied. The teens skated off. Karen stomped back to her house. But I noticed something strange as she walked away. Her porch light was shattered. The glass hung in jagged pieces. Later that night, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Miss Gina standing there, wrapped in a shawl, eyes wide. "You need to come with me," she whispered. "Now." We hurried to her backyard. She pointed past the fence, and there, in the shadows behind her shed, was something I hadn't expected to see again. Karen, crouched down, digging, with her bare hands. What she was unearthing, I couldn't tell. But the look on her face? It wasn't just anger. It was fear, pure and wild. And that's when I realized Karen wasn't just scared of losing power. She was hiding something deeper, something dangerous. Miss Gina gripped my arm as we watched from the shadows. Karen's hands moved fast, clawing at the dirt like she was trying to beat time itself. Her breath came out in short, frantic gasps. The moonlight cut across her face, and for a moment, I didn't see the sharp-tongued HOA queen everyone feared. I saw a woman unraveling, unhinged. "What is she doing?" Gina whispered. "I don't know," I said quietly. "But I think it's something she didn't want anyone to find." Karen didn't see us. She kept digging until her hands hit something solid. She looked around, paranoid, and then pulled out a small black box, no bigger than a shoebox. She dusted it off, clutched it to her chest, and scurried back toward her house like a raccoon caught in the trash. Miss Gina squeezed my hand. "That woman's hiding secrets." I nodded, heart pounding. "I think," Gina added, "you were never her target. You were her distraction. The next day, the neighborhood felt tense again. Word had spread about the meeting I held. Some people were thrilled, others were cautious. A few still loyal to Karen whispered about how things were going too far. But nobody talked about the box. Nobody but me and Miss Gina knew. I considered confronting Karen directly, but something told me she'd only deny it, and I needed to know what was inside that box first. So, I waited. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing her face, the panic in her eyes, the dirt under her nails, the desperation. I wasn't sure if it was guilt, fear, or both. By morning, I made up my mind. I had to find out what she was hiding. But before I could act, I got a letter taped to my front door. No envelope. Just a plain white sheet, typed in bold. You've gone too far. Back off, or the neighborhood won't be the only thing you lose. No name, no signature. Just that. I stepped outside, scanning the street. Quiet. Normal. But that letter? It wasn't just a threat. It was a line drawn in the sand. So I crossed it. I went back to Miss Gina's that afternoon, pretending to help her with her fence. But really, I was watching Karen's place from a distance. I noticed she'd been pacing, constantly checking the window. Something was eating at her. That night, I saw my chance. Her car pulled out of the driveway just after 8 p.m. She was alone. I waited 10 minutes to be sure she wasn't circling back. Then I walked across the street. I wasn't breaking in, not technically. I still had the legal right to inspect the land and any structures on it, per the lease conditions. Still, my gut twisted as I crept around back. I found the shed unlocked, and inside, a safe, one of those old-school types with a dial combination. The box she'd dug up wasn't there, but I spotted something else. A stack of photos. A man's face. Same man. Different years. Always smiling. Karen beside him in some, in others just him alone. One photo in particular had a date scrawled on the back. March 15th, 2002. That name. That date. Something clicked in the back of my mind, but I couldn't place it. Then I saw the corner of another folder, tucked behind a loose wooden panel. I pulled it free. It was labeled, Holding Trust, Sunshore Properties. I froze. That was the same name on the land deed I bought. Why would Karen have a file on the trust that used to own her land? I opened it and read fast. Contracts, transfer memos, meeting notes, names, hers included. And then one page caught my eye. Property transfer denied. Conflict of interest flagged. K. Jennings. Karen Jennings. She tried to buy the land herself, and was rejected. No wonder she lost her mind when I got it. I heard a car door slam in the distance. I shoved everything back and slipped out the side gate, heart racing. I barely made it back across the street before her headlights turned down the block. I watched from behind the curtain as she got out of the car with a paper bag and what looked like a burner phone. She wasn't just paranoid. She was running something, and she was getting sloppy. The next morning, I visited the county office. I wanted answers about that old holding trust. The clerk on duty, an older man with kind eyes, dug through some files for me. And that's when he said something I wasn't ready for. Funny thing, Karen Jennings used to be a signatory for this trust, years ago. Quiet deal. Got pulled for conflict of interest when someone higher up caught wind of it. There were whispers of fraud, but nothing stuck. He handed me a faded file. Looks like she tried to claim land she already managed. That's a big no-no in the property world. My jaw tightened. It all made sense now. She'd tried to buy the land under her house to secure her control over the HOA. She got denied. And then I walked in and bought it instead. That wasn't just a power shift. It was a public embarrassment. And now, she was unraveling because I had the thing she wanted most, leverage. I walked out of that office thinking it couldn't get worse, but when I got home, there were tire marks on my lawn. A cracked window, and the same box Karen had dug up, was sitting on my porch. No note this time, just the box. And inside it, a pistol, a burner phone, and a single photo of me, crossed out in red marker. I stood there for a long time, just staring at that box on my porch. The wind brushed past my ear like a whisper, and for a moment, the world felt quieter than it should have. Too quiet. The pistol inside wasn't dusty or old. It was clean, oiled, and heavy. The burner phone had one number stored in it. No name, just a number. And the photo of me, crossed out in red, didn't feel like a prank anymore. It felt like a warning. I knew fear. I'd faced it in war zones, in combat, in storms out at sea where the waves reached the sky. But this fear? This was different. This wasn't about survival in the wild. This was about survival in a place where people were supposed to be your neighbors. I called the police. Not 911, but the direct line to a friend from my Navy days who now worked in local law enforcement. Officer James Rayner. Good man, no nonsense. Within 20 minutes, he was on my porch, gloves on, taking photos, bagging evidence. "You sure this is from her?" he asked quietly, eyes scanning the quiet street. "No," I said, "but I know she dug it up. I saw her." He looked at the photo again. "This isn't just harassment. This is a threat." He took the items and promised to start an official report. But I could tell from his tone he didn't like how messy it already was. After he left, I sat in my living room, blinds drawn, heart still racing. Karen hadn't just been power-hungry. She'd been covering her tracks for years. That pistol, the burner phone, the rejected land bid, it all pointed to something bigger, something older. But I wasn't backing down. That same evening, I hosted a second community meeting. Same rec center, same open invite. More people came this time. Some were still skeptical, but many looked hopeful, like they could breathe again. I told them the truth about Karen's failed attempt to buy the land, the trust's records, and the intimidation tactics I was now facing. I didn't name her outright. I didn't need to. People were starting to see it for themselves. After the meeting, a man I'd never spoken to before approached me. Tall, older, rough hands that looked like they built things. "I'm Drew," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Used to work with Karen's husband, before he... you know." I didn't know. "Before what?" He hesitated. "Before he disappeared." My blood chilled. "Wait, disappeared how?" He rubbed the back of his neck. 10 years ago. Just up and vanished. Left a note, supposedly. But I never bought it. He was a quiet man. Kept to himself. But she always had her way of making people do what she wanted." He looked me in the eyes. "Be careful. She's not done." I nodded slowly. Neither am I. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I stared at the burner phone, still in its bag on the dining table. I couldn't shake the thought. What if that box had been meant to disappear? What if I'd stumbled into something Karen never thought anyone would see again? And then, my doorbell rang. I froze. It was 1:17 a.m. I walked to the door, peered through the peephole. Nobody. But just as I turned to walk away, I saw it. Out the corner of my eye, a shadow moving between the hedges. Slow, deliberate. I yanked open the door and stepped out. "Who's there?" I shouted. No answer. Then I heard it. A loud snap from the side yard. I ran toward it, flashlight in hand. And there, just past the fence, was my shed. The door was wide open, and a figure in dark clothing was bent over inside it. I crept forward, slow and quiet, heart pounding in my ears. Then, crash. The figure burst out and bolted past me, nearly knocking me down. I chased them down the driveway, across the front lawn, but they disappeared into the trees behind the neighborhood park. Too fast. Too prepared. I went back and checked the shed. Nothing was missing. But something was added. Another photo. This one was of Miss Gina. And beneath it, written in the same red marker, "Stay out of it or she's next." The next morning, I sat with Miss Gina on her porch. I didn't sugarcoat anything, She was scared but calm. I always knew something wasn't right with her, she said softly. But now, I'm sure of it. I showed her the photo. Her hands trembled. This is bigger than an HOA, I said. This is personal. She looked at me, eyes clear. Then it's time we fight back. Not with anger, with truth. That afternoon, I went to the town archives. I pulled every public record, newspaper clipping, and online post I could find on Karen Jennings and her husband, Mark Jennings. And I found something strange. The night Mark disappeared, there had been a fire on the edge of town. A shed belonging to her uncle burned to the ground. No investigation, no follow-up. Just a tiny obituary for Mark 2 weeks later. Closed casket funeral. No cause of death listed. That didn't sit right. And it got worse. When I ran his name through the county employment system, it came up blank. Scrubbed. As if he'd never existed. Someone had erased him. I was deep in thought when my phone buzzed. Blocked number. I let it ring. Then a voicemail came through. I played it. Static. Then a voice. Karen's voice. You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've walked into. Click. No goodbye. No threat. Just that chilling promise. But she was wrong. Because the more she tried to scare me, the more I realized she was terrified of something herself, and I was getting close to it. The voicemail echoed in my mind for hours. Her voice wasn't angry this time. It wasn't smug or loud or full of righteous HOA fury like before. It was low, cold, measured. That's what made it worse. That's what made it real. You have no idea what you've walked into. I played that sentence over and over again in my head as I sat in front of my laptop, reading old articles and cross-referencing anything I could find about Mark Jennings, the mysterious fire, and Karen's involvement with the trust. Piece by piece. It started to come together like a puzzle someone tried really hard to bury. Mark hadn't disappeared. He died that night in the fire, but no fire report was filed under his name. The obituary didn't list a cause. And the shed that burned? It belonged to Karen's uncle, but the address tied back to a secondary holding account under the trust Karen once worked for. It was starting to look like Mark had uncovered something, and then he was gone. I felt a chill settle into my chest like ice water. This woman wasn't just an obsessive rule enforcer or a petty neighborhood dictator. She was someone with secrets worth hiding. Desperately, and I had just dug them up. Later that day, Officer Rayner called me back. We ran forensics on the pistol, he said. Serial number was filed off, but we lifted a partial fingerprint. Lab's trying to match it. Do you think she's capable of... I stopped myself. You want my personal opinion? He said. Yeah, I do. Before we hung up, he said one more thing. Watch your back. This isn't just an HOA squabble anymore. That night, I got a text from Miss Gina. Meet me outside. Now. I threw on a jacket and hurried across the street. She was pacing her porch with a flashlight in her hand and a look of pure panic on her face. Someone left this in my mailbox, she said, holding up an envelope. No stamp, no name. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A copy of her late husband's medical records. Diagnosed with Alzheimer's 2 years before he passed. At first, it didn't make sense. Why would Karen dig that up? Then I realized. It wasn't about Gina's husband. It was about silencing her. Because Gina knew Karen before she became the tyrant of the HOA. They were neighbors back then, just 2 young wives in a newly built community. Back then she was different, Gina whispered. Friendly, quiet, but after Mark died, something snapped. I walked her back inside and made sure all her doors were locked. As I stepped outside, I caught movement again, same spot behind the hedges near the park. I ran toward it this time, full sprint. But this time, I caught them, not Karen, a teenage boy, maybe 17. He froze when I grabbed his arm. Please, don't call the cops, he cried. Who are you? I asked, letting go slightly. I'm Logan. I live down by Elm Street. Why are you sneaking around here? He swallowed hard. She paid me to leave stuff. That's it, I swear. She found me at the bus stop, said she'd give me $100 to leave some papers in mailboxes and run. Did she threaten you? He hesitated. She said if I told anyone, my mom would lose her job. What job? She works at the hospital. Karen said she had a friend there. Said she could make things difficult. I let out a slow breath and stepped back. Karen was recruiting kids now, using fear like currency. You didn't do anything wrong, Logan, I said, but you have to stay away from her. He nodded, tears in his eyes, then ran off into the night. The next morning, I got a knock at the door. This time it wasn't Karen. It was Bill, the skinny HOA assistant with the glasses. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. I need to talk, he said. Inside. I let him in. He sat down at my kitchen table, hands shaking. I didn't know what she was doing. He began. At first it was just HOA stuff, rules, fines, complaints. But then she started asking me to dig up personal info on people. Bank stuff, mortgages, family. Why would you agree to that? She said it was for security, that the HOA needed to protect the neighborhood from undesirables. I stared at him, disgusted. And you believed her? He hung his head. No, I just didn't want her turning on me. He pulled out a flash drive. I copied the files, all of them. She's got a folder with every resident's name, medical records, financial history, even photos. Photos of what? People, in their homes, at night. My stomach turned. Did she install cameras? I don't know, he said, but I think she has access to something, maybe through that trust system, some kind of surveillance she's piggybacking off of. I took the flash drive and promised to keep his name out of it. As soon as he left, I plugged it into my laptop. And there it was, a folder labeled Compliance. Inside were dozens of files, each with a neighbor's name, private emails, utility bills, even a scanned psychiatric report on a woman 4 houses down who'd lost her daughter last year. It was control, pure control. She'd been building her empire brick by brick, secret by secret, using fear as cement. And now I had her entire kingdom in one small drive. But just as I started to copy the files, the screen blinked. Remote access detected. A message flashed. You're trespassing again. This time I won't call the cops. Then the screen went black, and a window shattered in my living room. I ran out front. Smoke, fire, my mailbox was burning. Inside the flames, something metal clanged loudly and dropped to the curb. A key, old, rusted, tied to a tag that read, "You want answers? Open the gatehouse." And in that moment, I remembered. The old gatehouse by the woods, long sealed. HOA said it was condemned years ago. But now I knew. That was where the truth lived. And I was going to open it. The gatehouse stood like a ghost at the far edge of the neighborhood, half swallowed by vines, its stone walls cracked and crumbling, the old rusted gate twisted on its hinges like it had been yanked open by a storm decades ago. Most folks didn't even notice it anymore. They said it was just some relic from before the development was built, too old to be torn down, too small to matter. But now, with the old key clenched in my hand and the fire from my mailbox still smoldering behind me, I knew. It mattered more than anything else in this neighborhood. I walked fast, heart pounding, senses sharp. The path was overgrown, thorns scraping at my jacket, but I didn't stop. I didn't think. I just moved. When I reached the heavy door, the key slipped in like it was meant to. Click. The sound was final. A lock that hadn't been opened in years surrendered with a groan. Inside, it smelled like damp wood and secrets. Dust swirled in the air as I stepped into the single room, flashlight cutting through the dark. It wasn't empty. Not by a long shot. There was a desk in the corner, an old metal filing cabinet, and next to it, stacked floor to ceiling, were boxes. Dozens of them, all marked with HOA lot numbers. I ran my hand over the nearest label, Lot 102, Jennings Karen's house. I opened the box. Inside were surveillance logs, camera angles, audio transcripts, every single conversation she'd recorded in that neighborhood, meetings, dinners, private moments. Some were typed up, others still on cassette tapes. And then, beneath the folders, I found it. A memory card. I plugged it into my portable reader, my breath catching in my throat. There were video files, old ones. The timestamps were from 10 years ago, the night of the fire. I clicked the first one. It showed Mark Jennings, alive, talking to someone off camera. "I told you, Karen, this isn't right," he said. "You're spying on people. You're using the trust to blackmail them. This isn't what we agreed to." Then her voice, cold and steady. "You agreed to help me protect this place. You said you'd support me. I didn't agree to destroy people's lives. Then maybe it's time you stopped pretending you're the good guy." He took a step back. Then the screen went black. The next file was silent, but it showed the same shed that burned down that night, and Karen walking away from it, alone. My stomach turned, my skin went cold. She didn't just lose her husband, she erased him, buried him under lies, built an empire on his ashes, and now I had the proof. I packed everything into a duffel bag, videos, logs, tapes, files, and left the gatehouse behind like it might crumble if I looked back. I went straight to Officer Rayner. He didn't even blink. Just nodded once and started calling it in. That same night, while the evidence was being logged, I got the message from one of the patrol units. Karen was gone, vanished, house empty, phones off, car missing. They issued a BOLO alert across the state, but I knew deep down, she was already running before the fire started. Maybe she had another identity, another safe house. She'd built her life on control and manipulation. She knew how to vanish, but for once, she didn't get to control the ending. Because by morning, news trucks lined our street. The HOA was under full investigation. Every resident got a letter explaining the corruption, the surveillance, and the blackmail system Karen had used to stay in power. And at the next community meeting, held right on the green space she once ruled like a queen, Miss Gina stood up and read a message I helped her write. "This neighborhood was built on fear, but fear doesn't live here anymore. We're taking back our street. Together." The applause was thunderous. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years hugged. Kids rode bikes down the middle of the road, laughing freely. For the first time since I moved in, it felt like home. And then, 2 days later, I got a call from the land trust office. They'd traced a payment that tried to reverse the deed I filed. Someone tried to illegally reclaim the land through an offshore account. They froze it. I asked who was listed on the paperwork. The voice on the line said 2 words that made my blood run cold. Mark Jennings. But Mark was dead. Or at least, he was supposed to be. Was he alive? Had Karen faked his death to protect him? Or had someone taken his name for something darker? I didn't know. But I knew this story wasn't over. Not yet. Because a week later I got a postcard in the mail. No return address, just a photo of the burned shed, and 3 words scribbled in red ink. "You missed something."